In the world of justice, where order meets courtroom drama, some situations defy expectations. The riveting story of Klaus Grabowski and Marianne Bachmeier is a tale of retribution and the tragic unraveling of justice itself. Imagine a courtroom filled with tension as accusations of kidnapping hung heavy. But when Marianne Bachmeier, overcome by grief and wrath, took matters into her own hands, the world was stunned. Let's pull back the layers of sorrow and retribution and expose stories where the pursuit of justice collided with the darkest corners of the human heart. Here are 7 people who died in court, and the reason why: Klaus Grabowski. The terrible story of Klaus Grabowski and the heartbreaking events that occurred in a courtroom in March 1981 are as unsettling as they are moving. Marianne Bachmeier, a devastated mother, is at the center of this story, leading to an unusual act of retaliation during the trial of the man accused of kidnapping and killing her daughter, Anna Bachmeier. Marianne Bachmeier came to Lübeck, Germany, the tribunal on 6 March 1981. The trial of Klaus Grabowski, accused of horrible atrocities against her daughter, was on its 3rd day. Dressed in a white raincoat with hands in her pockets, Marianne went determinedly into the courtroom. To fully comprehend the gravity of this situation, one must first understand the sequence of events that led to this sad culmination. Anna Bachmeier awoke on the 5th of May 1980 with a defiant spirit. A quarrel with her mother developed, prompting Marianne to grudgingly allow Anna to remain home from school. Anna planned to pay a visit to Klaus Grabowski, a local butcher who had let her play with his cats. Marianne had no idea. Unbeknownst to the inhabitants of Lübeck, Grabowski had a dark past. He was a convicted sex offender who had previously molested 2 young girls. Despite receiving chemical castration in 1976 to control his urges, Grabowski eventually reversed the effects with hormone therapy, which had disastrous results. Anna walked into Grabowski's trap on that fateful day. What happened during her visit is unclear, but Grabowski held her captive for hours before taking her life. His actions were deliberate and cold-blooded. Grabowski murdered Anna and buried her body along a canal bank under cover of darkness. When Anna did not return home, Marianne immediately reported her disappearance to the police. Recognizing the urgency and probable danger, authorities initiated an emergency search operation. That same night, Grabowski brazenly boasted about his crime to his girlfriend, resulting in a heated confrontation that caused her to report him to the police. Grabowski was quickly captured before he could drink his 3rd beer. Under rigorous police questioning, Grabowski confessed in terrifying detail. He acknowledged murdering Anna to avoid returning to prison, where he had already served time for other offenses. He said Anna had threatened to disclose his previous inappropriate behavior unless he paid her off, a statement that would subsequently be disputed. Marianne Bachmeier's life had been filled with difficulty long before the sadness of losing Anna. Marianne was raised in a turbulent environment where she had a troubled connection with her parents and experienced the tragedy of forced adoptions as a teenager. Anna, born in 1973 at the age of 23, gave Marianne a new feeling of purpose and joy. Marianne, determined to provide a secure upbringing, had even undergone sterilization to avoid further pregnancies, putting her entire attention on rearing Anna. The link between mother and daughter was strong and caring. Friends remarked on the two's intimate bond, with Anna developing into a vivacious little child under Marianne's loving care. However, this period of bliss was cut short when Grabowski kidnapped and murdered Anna, leaving Marianne distraught and consumed with grief and wrath. Marianne's life focused on vengeance for a year after Anna died. She methodically planned her retaliation, purchasing a Beretta pistol and refining her marksmanship. Her choice to attend Grabowski's trial was not only to testify, but also to actively participate in her pursuit of justice. Marianne came to the courthouse on the 3rd day of the trial with determination written all over her face. She slipped through security wearing her characteristic white raincoat, her grief-stricken demeanor avoiding any suspicion. Marianne quietly approached Grabowski from behind, raised her pistol, and fired while he was unaware in the courtroom. The gunshot echoed across the courtroom, putting an abrupt end to Grabowski's life and Marianne's search for justice. Marianne was promptly arrested, charged with murder, and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Despite public criticism of her actions, Marianne's reasons were based on deep grief and a wish to preserve Anna's memory from further tarnishing. Marianne, who was released after 3 years in prison, sought consolation overseas before returning to Germany in 1994 when she reflected on her turbulent life in a moving interview. Marianne Bachmeier's narrative is about sorrow, determination, and the complicated interaction between personal grief and justice. Her acts, motivated by a mother's unwavering love and loss. David Paradiso. David Paradiso's life is a tragic story of personal conflict, legal fights, and a stunning act of violence that resulted in tremendous loss. The story begins in December 2006, when Paradiso was arrested for allegedly taking the life of his lover, Eileen Pelt. This incident astounded both his community and law enforcement officers. Their brief connection ended tragically when Paradiso fatally murdered Eileen in the back seat of a car driven by his mother, Deborah Paradiso. The circumstances surrounding this crime, including the disposal of Eileen's body in a distant place while driving from Loy, California to Amador County, suggested frightening premeditation, perplexing many and prompting a serious investigation into Paradiso's mental state and reasons. During the subsequent judicial processes, Paradiso's defense team claimed that his actions were influenced by methamphetamine, a powerful stimulant known to impair judgment and cause erratic behavior. This defense attempted to contextualize Paradiso's otherwise unexplained behavior by claiming that substance usage had a substantial impact on his mental faculties at the time of the crime. Despite these arguments, the prosecution made a strong case throughout the 2009 trials, depicting Paradiso as a callous offender, unconcerned about the implications of his actions. The trial was highlighted by horrifying witnesses, forensic evidence, and graphic descriptions of the crime, all of which painted a damning picture and resulted in Paradiso's guilt. The courtroom scene turned tragic when Paradiso abruptly altered his defense approach. He initially claimed self-defense and drug-induced impairment, but later revealed that he believed Eileen deserved to die. This frightening shift suggested deeper psychological difficulties. Deborah Paradiso had expressed worries about her son's mental health before the trial, including informing police about his possession of a pistol out of fear for his and others' safety. However, these concerns were not appropriately addressed, paving the way for a disastrous sequence of events. Throughout the trial, David Paradiso's behavior got increasingly unpredictable, ending in a violent outburst in which he attacked the presiding judge, Cinda Fox, with a blade. The courtroom degenerated into pandemonium as Paradiso severely injured Judge Fox before being shot by a detective in defense of those present. Despite prompt medical assistance, Paradiso died from his injuries, leaving a lasting impression on everyone concerned. Judge Fox survived the attack, but the episode highlighted major gaps in mental health treatment and judicial security procedures. In the aftermath of these sad occurrences, Paradiso's family, particularly his mother, Deborah, and brother Aaron, experienced deep anguish and bewilderment. They grieved that addressing David's mental health issues could have avoided the tragic outcome. Aaron Paradiso has openly highlighted his brother's fight with paranoid schizophrenia, asking for better mental health care and criticizing missed possibilities for intervention. Slobodan Praljak's spectacular and sad death at his sentence hearing in 2017 highlights the complex and often devastating interplay between war, justice, and personal agency. Praljak, a Bosnian Croat born in Yugoslavia in 1945, had a successful early career in both academics and business. He pursued higher education, became a professor, and ran an electronics company, leading a seemingly ordinary and prosperous life. However, the advent of the Croatian War of Independence in 1991 significantly altered his destiny. Praljak joined the Croatian military and swiftly rose to the rank of general, playing an important part in the fight. His military career, however, was marred by serious accusations of war crimes. These claims included ordering attacks on religious sites, plundering, and assaulting residents. Praljak was also related to the notorious Dritelj camp, where Bosniak men were subjected to horrific treatment under his direction. Despite these serious claims, Praljak's life appeared to resume routine once the war ended in 1995. He went back to civilian life and became a successful businessman. He built a production firm and a tobacco company and wrote 25 novels, demonstrating his capacity to prosper in a calm setting. However, the specter of his wartime exploits returned in the early 2000s. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia has charged Praljak and 5 other men with war crimes. These were serious charges involving violations of the Geneva Conventions, laws and customs of war, and crimes against humanity. The claims were linked to his high-ranking position throughout the war, in which atrocities perpetrated by his subordinates were blamed on his direct commands or failure to prevent them. The trial, which began in April 2006, was protracted and complex, underscoring the difficulties of pursuing war crimes and the profound wounds caused by the Balkan conflicts. Praljak vigorously disputed the claims, portraying himself as a loyal military leader who defends his people and maintains his innocence. In 2013, Praljak was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in jail. Despite the verdict, he maintained his innocence and aggressively disputed the decision. In November 2017, the ICTY reviewed portions of his sentence, upholding some convictions and reversing others. However, the overall 20-year prison sentence stayed unaltered. Praljak had already served 13 years, with about 7 years remaining till his parole. In a surprising turn of events during the court's final verdict, the courtroom instantly responded by drawing curtains, and Praljak was transported to the hospital. Despite the quick response, he died of heart failure caused by the drug he consumed. Praljak's tragic death sparked numerous inquiries. Extensive investigations ensued, but the source of the poison remained unknown, adding intrigue to the case. The reactions to Praljak's death were varied, reflecting the intricacies of the situation. Some former ICTY judges claimed that his actions deprived the victims of the full measure of justice they sought. Praljak's dramatic death triggered larger discussions on the nature of justice and accountability, particularly in the context of war crimes. Sjala Angelau. Sjala Angelau's case is a tragic example of how a courtroom, which is normally associated with justice and order, may quickly become a scene of violence and death. The incident occurred on 21 April 2014 in a federal courthouse in Salt Lake City, Utah, and it exemplifies the tremendous emotions and possible dangers of legal processes, particularly those involving gang operations and violent crimes. Sjala Angelau, a 25-year-old male, belonged to the Tongan Crip gang, a prominent street gang that engaged in a variety of criminal activities such as drug trafficking, robbery, and violent assault. He was on trial for racketeering conspiracy as part of a larger crackdown on gang activity in the Salt Lake City area. The trial was notable because it reflected the federal government's efforts to destroy the TCG and confront the violence and criminal activity associated with gang operations. The trial was proceeding as planned on the morning of 21st of April 2014. The courtroom was packed with the normal intensity that comes with high-stakes criminal cases as attorneys presented their arguments and witnesses testified. One such witness was testifying against Angelau, possibly supplying key evidence that may implicate him and his associates. Angelou abruptly jumped up, grabbed a pen, and charged toward the witness stand in a forceful and hostile manner. The unexpected explosion of violence caused instant confusion and panic in the courtroom. The U.S. Marshal in the courtroom, who was in charge of keeping order and guaranteeing the safety of everyone present, reacted promptly to the threat. The Marshal took his handgun and, in a single second, fired 4 shots at Angelou, neutralizing the threat. Angelou was struck and collapsed to the ground. He was swiftly treated by medical workers. However, he died from his injuries soon after the incident. The shooting of Siale Angelou in court was a highly contentious and widely publicized incident. It highlighted a number of concerns concerning courtroom security, the use of force by law enforcement agents, and the larger consequences of gang violence. The incident emphasized the problems of guaranteeing safety in courtrooms, particularly during high-risk cases. Courtrooms are intended to be places of order and justice, but they can often become venues for violent confrontations, especially when dealing with individuals involved in significant criminal activity. The possession of weapons, even something as seemingly innocent as a pen, can pose serious risks. The use of fatal force by the U.S. Marshals sparked discussions and investigations. Law enforcement officials are trained to make quick decisions in high-stress situations, and the Marshal's decision to kill Angelou was taken with the goal of preserving the lives of all present in the courtroom, including the witness who was being attacked. The Department of Justice investigated the event and decided that the Marshal's actions were reasonable given the circumstances. Jonathan Schmitz. Jonathan Schmitz's story is tragic and complex, unfolding dramatically in public during the mid-1990s. It all started innocently enough, with a guest appearance on the famed Jenny Jones television show. In 1995, Jonathan, then 24 years old, was called on the show under the guise that someone had a crush on him and wanted to confess it. What began as a fun and comic setup suddenly turned into a series of events that would alter people's lives forever. During the show, Jonathan's demeanor was one of curiosity, with a hint of excitement at the potential of uncovering his hidden admirer. However, his sentiments changed dramatically when the admirer, Scott Amador, presented himself. Scott revealed his attraction to Jonathan in front of a live audience, leaving Jonathan noticeably surprised. Just 3 days after his broadcast confession, Jonathan discovered a suggestive message left by Scott on his porch. In response, Jonathan made a terrible decision that changed both of their lives forever. He obtained a 12-gauge shotgun and confronted Scott at his home, fatally shooting him. The repercussions of this horrible act reverberated throughout the media and the justice system. Jonathan quickly contacted 911 after realizing the significance of his actions, confessing to the shooting. He was soon detained and charged with first-degree murder. What followed was a highly publicized trial that delved into the complexities of ethical boundaries, mental health, and the ramifications of public humiliation. Jonathan's defense team claimed that the great public humiliation he experienced on the Jenny Jones show negatively impacted his mental health. They argued that he was not in the correct frame of mind at the time of the shooting and that he should face a reduced charge owing to decreased capacity. This defense approach drew national attention to the case, raising questions about the media's obligations and the psychological consequences of public exposure. The trial took an unexpected turn when Jonathan carried a pistol into the courtroom. During a period of high tension, he fired the weapon, sparking confusion and terror among those present. He was quickly transported to the hospital for emergency surgery, and the episode sparked severe questions about courtroom security and the treatment of people with mental illnesses inside the legal system. Following this alarming turn of events, Jonathan's mental health was closely scrutinized. To shed light on his mental state, the court hired a psychiatrist to analyze him. Jonathan was diagnosed with depression and multiple personality disorder, which shed insight into the intricacies of his conduct. Ultimately, the jury agreed with Jonathan's defense team's arguments about his mental state. In March 1996, he was convicted of second-degree murder rather than the originally sought first-degree conviction. Despite the gravity of his conduct, Jonathan received a sentence ranging from 25 to 50 years in prison, which astonished many given the possible severity of his crime. Jonathan Schmitz's case is a devastating reminder of the long-term ramifications of public humiliation, as well as the complexity of mental health in the justice system. It sparked national debates on the ethics of reality television, the media's role in publicizing personal affairs, and the treatment of people suffering from mental illnesses. The tragic death of Scott Amador, as well as Jonathan Schmitz's following legal battle, serve as a somber reminder of how inextricably linked personal issues and public exposure may become, with long-term consequences for all parties involved. Brian Nichols. Brian Nichols' life story is a scary one, culminating in a horrific act of violence that shook Atlanta in 2005. Nichols was born into poverty and conquered early odds, but his career turned tragic, culminating in a high-profile courthouse shooting. Adversity and periodic run-ins with the law characterized Nichols' formative years. Despite growing up in difficult circumstances, he was able to attend Cowan University in the late 1980s. During this time, Nichols developed a reputation for his commanding presence and martial arts abilities, which would later become legendary. However, his time at Cowan University was not without incident. Nichols ran with the wrong crowd and finally joined a gang. Berks County legal records suggest that many arrests occurred during this time period, including allegations of terroristic threats, assault, and harassment. Despite the gravity of the charges, Nichols avoided major legal consequences, a trend that would continue throughout his turbulent life. Nichols temporarily attended Newberry College on a football scholarship, but departed before finishing his studies. In 1995, he moved to Georgia in pursuit of a job, presumably putting his turbulent background behind him. However, his life took a nasty turn in September 2004 when he was jailed for a heinous crime, attacking and forcing himself on his ex-girlfriend. The incident, which happened 8 years after their split, was motivated by jealousy over her new relationship. Armed with duct tape, Nichols committed aggravated sodomy and burglary, shocking his town and laying the groundwork for his subsequent violent outburst. Even before his trial, Nichols made troubling statements in court, implying resistance and refusal to accept the legal repercussions that awaited him. As Nichols awaited prosecution for his horrible acts, officials issued warnings about his violent tendencies. Friends and acquaintances apparently informed prosecutors and law enforcement of Nichols' attempts to flee custody. Concerns were expressed about his resolve to flee justice, with particular details, such as leaving a credit card for a possible escape attempt, emphasizing the gravity of the threat he represented. Despite these warnings, Nichols carried out his violent plans on the 11th of March 2005. While being transported to his trial in downtown Atlanta, Nichols overpowered a sheriff's officer, took her firearm, and went on a crime spree inside the courthouse. His first victim was Judge Roland Barnes, who he shot in the back of the head during a civil trial. This blatant act of violence surprised the courtroom and prompted a hurried search for Nichols. Nichols resumed his tirade, determined to find his ex-girlfriend, who was thankfully not present in the court that day. His violent binge killed 4 people, including a court reporter and another constable, before he was arrested. The aftermath of Nichols's activities was a city in shock and a court system dealing with serious security flaws. His trial was heavily scrutinized, with extensive media attention focusing on courthouse security failings and Nichols's mental health. His defense team contended that Nichols was legally insane at the time of the shootings, which, while contentious, added layers of complexity to an already dismal case. Brian Nichols was convicted of various offenses, including murder, and was given multiple life sentences. His conviction and subsequent jail are a sobering reminder of the dangers that can arise when unrestrained emotions and criminal purpose intersect. Went on a crime spree inside the courthouse. His first victim was Judge Roland Barnes, who he shot in the back of the head during a civil trial. This blatant act of violence surprised the courtroom and prompted a hurried search for Nichols. Nichols resumed his tirade, determined to find his ex-girlfriend, who was thankfully not present in the court that day. His violent binge killed 4 people, including a court reporter and another constable, before he was arrested. The aftermath of Nichols's activities was a city in shock and a court system dealing with serious security flaws. His trial was heavily scrutinized, with extensive media attention focusing on courthouse security failings and Nichols's mental health. His defense team contended that Nichols was legally insane at the time of the shootings, which, while contentious, added layers of complexity to an already dismal case. Brian Nichols was convicted of various offenses, including murder, and was given multiple life sentences. His conviction and subsequent jail are a sobering reminder of the dangers that can arise when unrestrained emotions and criminal purpose intersect. Subsequent jail are a sobering reminder of the dangers that can arise when unrestrained emotions and criminal purpose intersect. Michael Marine. Michael Marine's life and descent are terrible stories of money, desperation, and eventually, criminality. Marine was born into a life that appeared destined for success, with Wall Street accomplishments and significant educational laurels from Brigham Young University and Yale Law School. He lived a life of luxury, surrounded by luxurious homes and a multi-million-dollar art collection, symbolizing the American dream. However, Marine's life took a sudden turn when financial difficulties arose. Marine attempted to fix his mortgage troubles through unconventional means, but was unable to satisfy the financial expectations of his $2.5 million property in Phoenix's elite Biltmore Estates neighborhood. He even attempted to raffle off the land at a charitable event, but none of his efforts were successful. Faced with rising bills and seemingly insurmountable financial issues, Marine devised a desperate and ill-conceived plan: arson. In June 2011, he deliberately set fire to his own mansion, trying to collect insurance money to help with his financial problems. Investigators discovered that the fire, which began in many locations and spread quickly thanks to phone books, was a deliberate act of insurance fraud. The finding of scuba diving equipment in Marine's closet emphasized the audacity of his scheme, perplexing detectives and adding to the strange aspect of the crime. Despite his efforts to portray the fire as an accident, the evidence against Marine was overwhelming. His once promising life gradually unraveled as he faced significant accusations such as arson against an occupied structure and attempted insurance fraud. The judicial proceedings against Marine culminated in June 2012 when a jury found him guilty of all charges. Marine was greatly shaken by this decision, and his sadness was palpable in court. In a startling and terrible turn of events, Marine took what looked to be a fatal drug from a sports bottle just after the verdict was pronounced. Despite frantic efforts to resuscitate him, Marine died shortly after being brought to the hospital. Michael Marine's story serves as a warning about the effects of financial desperation and the lengths some people would go to avoid their problems. His once sparkling life and career were overshadowed by a single act of criminality motivated by desperation, which resulted in sad and catastrophic repercussions. The case also demonstrated the intricacies of white-collar crime. Beyond human sorrow, Marine's story raised questions about the sufficiency of financial and emotional support systems for people in financial difficulties. It emphasized the importance of comprehensive policies for preventing and responding to financial crises, which can drive people to extreme measures and result in catastrophic effects.